Guys, it's me. I'm back. What's up, party people? We're like, Mads, come on. All right. What's going on? Oh. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Monster Bass Live. I'm playing with some technical challenges as I am the man at the controls right now. And as you remember, the last time we did this, it resulted in some really great outcomes. So today we're hoping that it's a little bit different. So we got a great show for you. We're going to take you through what is involved in making next month's box. You know, there's quite a process, and I feel like it's a good one worth sharing. And since we were talking about fall transition baits last week, I feel like it's a great follow through. But before we get there, I want to send a little shout out to Cast of Nasties. Let them know that we're thinking about them. You know, last week we all sent us our thoughts and prayers, and you know, unfortunately they had to check his dad into hospice, and so you know he's dealing with that. And I just want to let him know that you know we're thinking about him today. Travis Kelce still sucks. My fantasy team is 1-2, and I got to tell you, I should have won all 3 games. I've lost 2 games in a row by less than a point. And if Travis Kelce would just, you know, lace up his shoes and show up like a grown-ass man that has a $100 million contract, my team would be doing pretty darn well. But it's not. It's not. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. Between Travis Kelce and the USC Trojans' inability to stop the Michigan run, boy, oh boy, I got to tell you, it was a rough weekend. Did you guys see the 9-pound smallmouth that was caught in New York? That thing's a beast. That thing's a beast. I mean, I've never seen a smallmouth so big. I don't even know what that would be like catching one of those things. I mean, come on, a 9-pound smallmouth? Insane. Insane. All right, before we get the show started, I wanna click on something and read it for you. Before I tell you this, no money or other consideration is being solicited, and if sent in response will not be accepted. No offer to buy securities can be accepted. No part of the purchase price can be revealed or received until the offering statement is filed, and only through an intermediary's platform. An indication of interest involves no obligation or commitment of any kind. Reserving securities is simply an indication of interest. And you can learn more about what I'm about to tell you at monsterbass.com/invest. So, we've been flirting with the idea, and the time has finally come that we're going to wow. Mucinex. It's going to save me all day. The time has finally come that we're going to give you the opportunity to maybe own a piece of Monster Bass. And so somewhere in the middle of October, if we choose to do this, we're going to share all the information about this opportunity and let you decide whether that's something you want to participate in. And so that's why I have to read all that legal stuff. I don't really know what it means, but it just means you can't send me your money today. And I don't even get the money. It just goes to the bank because you're buying equity. But so if you're interested in just even learning more about this, you don't have to commit $1, but head to the website. There's an invest button. Just fill out your name and email. We'll put you on the list. We will let you know when the time comes in October to send more information about this. So there you have it. We got a great show, guys. And, you know, if this is your first time tuning in or you're watching this on the rewind, If you're not sure about it, you can get this on wherever you get your favorite podcast. Spotify, Amazon, Apple, you name it. It's everywhere. So if you like what you see today, make sure that you give us a thumbs up button. We're going to talk today about how we're gonna go about making the October box. We're going to talk trophy room. We're going to talk golden ticket. And I know that, if you get the subscription box, that you've got an individually numbered golden ticket. And at the end of the show, I'm going to call out a number. And if you win, I'm going to send you a whole bunch of great stuff because my garage is packed full of great stuff. It is. And I'm going to take some of it with me on Friday because yours truly has a full-day guide trip booked on Castaic. I'm going to go out and put the box to the test, film it, and share my adventures with you. I'm committed to going out twice a month. Enough of this being the guy that owns a fishing company that doesn't get a chance to go fishing. I think that's a limiting belief, and so I'm going to get out there twice a month. I'm going to share my story with you, and we'll see where we go with this stuff. All right, let's not wait any longer. I'd like to bring in Chris. I haven't seen him in a bit. So how you doing, man?
Good. I'm going a little dark today. We're going off the grid for our podcast, so gotta fight back with California PG&E. They're trying to get you, so figuring out how to hide away from things. So
don't you pay enough taxes that you should be able to have electricity?
Don't even start. We don't want to go down that road about taxes and electrical conglomerates and maybe monopolies. I don't know if we can call them that, but it's got to do what we got to do. But no, it's good. Life's good. Been fishing a little bit. Our fish haven't transitioned to fall. They're still down deep.
Okay.
There's no takers up shallow, but we're finding some good ones. Kelly caught like a 5+ yesterday. I was a little jealous because I had like a 3.5, thinking I was doing something cool. I had it in the net. She hooks up, and I went to net her fish with my fish in the net, and it shows you how much bigger 5+ versus 3.5. It's like embarrassing. But no, fish are moving. They're eating, but ours have not moved up. So it's kind of interesting. Northern California, we had some cooler weather hit, and then I think it's like almost close to 100 again. So
yeah,
I'm not complaining though. I like the hot. Keep it hot for a while. The fish will be fine.
Yeah.
I'm excited for you. Friday.
Yeah.
What's fishing been in, like down at Castaic? How's it been? Do you have a report?
I have a call with him tonight to talk about it.
Awesome. Cool.
Because I do want to bring some of our baits and some of Grande Bass's baits. I want to turn him on to some of those because in Southern California it's a very Yamamoto and Robo Worm centric crowd. So
right, for sure. No, and hey, they work finesse worms. That's one of those things that they're going to work wherever. The Robo Worm does work. I hate to tell you that may or may not allegedly that might have been that margarita mutilator that Kelly throws on drop shot. Thing just gets sucked in, and you talk to pros all around California, and not just limited to California. Margarita mutilator, anything peanut butter and jelly, a finesse worm, it gets chewed across the country. So don't shy away from that. So that may have been the worm that won the trophy last night on our boat, but that's all good times.
I love that.
Okay.
All right. Well, before we get started talking about how we create, the boxes, I wanted to go to a segment that we started last week called the Clip of the Week. Rafi's not here; he's traveling on business, but he did send me a clip, and I want to share that, and let's see what you guys all think.
Yo, don't touch my rod. Don't fucking touch my rod.
Trespassing on private property.
Don't threaten us.
You're trespassing on
Don't
private
threaten us.
property, young man.
We're waiting for the police to come.
You don't need to get out of here.
Leave. No, we're gonna talk to them.
Leave.
We're gonna talk to them. You threatened us.
He's our president.
You threatened us.
Want to go in the lake, young man?
You threatened us.
You want that phone to go in the lake?
Back away from
Here,
him.
boys.
Back
Walk
away
out of
from
here.
him. Back up.
Test me.
Back up from me. Back up from me.
Get out of here.
Back up from me.
How'd I take that phone and put it in the lake?
Yeah, now I'll press charges.
For what?
Like assault, what?
You're fishing in a private lake. Get the hell out of here now.
The cops are coming. We're just waiting for them.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we're waiting for them.
You know what? We're going to prosecute, so your parents are going to be real proud of that.
Right, and you smell like alcohol on your breath. I can smell it.
You're right. I had a drink. Is that against the law, dumb shit? Don't do it.
Yo, don't touch my rod. Don't fucking touch my rod. Yo.
No, done. I'm out. No.
That guy Forget how inappropriate it is. He's got to be like the most hated man because in looking for this clip, I found like every news media, like credible news sources were showing this video talking about this guy. I'll bet you he's not the president of his HOA anymore. That's for sure.
I mean, I want to say so many things in defense of the kids. First thing is if they are doing something wrong, if they're breaking the law, if they shouldn't be there, that's on them. That's fine. We need to set it up politely and appropriately. But that guy's behavior, I don't know. I mean, I raised 5 boys, and I would be so proud if they maybe threw him in the water, like just to be an honest, responsible dad. Like if the video, the guy says you want your phone to go in the water, I'd be like, how about you go in the water, big buddy, and like grab him, arm check him, and just both of you go into the water to swim or something. But yeah, that is bad behavior as a human, and shame on that guy for treating kids. I'll tell you, I have a son, and when we're doing things that may or may not be appropriate, like skateboarding across the street in a local area, the guards will come by and they're like, hey, you can't skateboard on the asphalt where the cars drive. And I'm always like, would you rather have them out egging houses and doing graffiti or smoking weed? Like, what do you want these kids to do? They're outside doing something healthy. So I would just have to ask that HOA, like, why is fishing so bad? If they can explain that it's hooks, they're trying to protect something. Like, give me the reason why those kids need to be treated that way on the secondary side. But first, like, why no fishing? But man, what a bummer. What a bummer. You know, that guy. So I feel so bad for Karens. Like, I mean, if you're named Karen, let's just publicly, like, there's got to be a good Karen. I know I've met some Karens, some good Karens, but what a rough way to go. That guy's a jerk.
Yeah,
so, too bad.
Well, whatever.
Yeah. So as a parent, can I ask you, like with your son, you ever get that call that your kid did something wrong like that?
No.
He's just too good, huh?
No.
Or he was too good at not being caught. Maybe maybe.
I think that my son, it's funny. He worked really hard at not being the bad kid, because he didn't want to, I'm divorced, and I think he wanted to be really good to also show his parents that he was really good.
That's cool.
And so he didn't. It's only now that he's starting to get into that, and he's identified it. We've talked about it, where he's like, yeah, I'm getting my fake ID. And I want to go to the parties. I want to, and I want to experiment a little bit. And I'm like, all right, well, you're in college. That's what you're supposed to do. But like, he would have, because I always used to joke, like, he lived in my guest house, and the fridge was full of alcohol, and he'd never touch it.
Never drink. Yeah, no,
I would have abused that thing, and my son never touched it once.
And because it was there, that's that whole thing, is like making something taboo and giving them where they have to break into the liquor closet and sneak it, might make it more alluring. So, having 6 children, 5 boys, and kind of running the gamut of, they're all so good as far as what they really did. And then you learn later, like, oh, I used to take mom's car out and drift it. And it's like, of course you did.
Of course.
That's like, that's that. Like, imagine that you were out burning. We had one son that I think he actually had to help pay for some new tires on Kelly's car once, just because that was punishment for actions. But man, beating up on kids because they're fishing, that's hard for me to get behind. I can't support that.
The guy's an idiot. And the best part is that video goes on for like another 2 minutes, and he's just literally just verbally abuses them. And I love that the little kids were just like, sir, we're just waiting for the police. And it goes on because his wife gets involved at one point, and you're like, oh my God. Anyway. All right. So I thought it'd be fun to talk about the October box because, even though we're like 5 days away, we are not finalized on what's going to go in the box. I've got a lot of options and configurations. And one of the things I heard last week when we were talking about the fall transition is we want to cover a lot of water. Whether it's top water, whether it's spinner baits or crank baits. We talked a lot about finesse worms. We talked about, jigs. We basically talked about bass that are going to be at every level of the water column. And so when I'm thinking about this month's box, that's a wide range of or the October box, there's a wide range of products. And, you know, obviously when we're putting it together, it's got to be seasonally appropriate. It's got to appeal to a wide range of anglers, whether you're a beginner or, you know, you're a seasoned guy like I'm about to become. And
Yeah.
the
No,
one thing,
I mean, I want to jump in because I was like, when you and I were talking about this offline, I was like, how do you even put this together with making sure it's appropriate for a beginner that's never thrown a jerkbait? And you give out a jerkbait, and it's like, okay, now I've got to send them towards videos to be able to utilize this tool I'm giving them. But at the same time, I'm excited to get my box every month. And so that consideration, you are connected personally with so many people in this Monster Bass family to make sure, and you could pick any name and you might pick something. I want to know, when you're configuring a box, do you have pressure? Because squeaky wheel gets the grease, all these different sayings. Do you have seasoned anglers that you personally know that give you instant feedback of like, hey, why is this in the box? Or hey, why isn't this in the box? How many people are you juggling? Give us an idea of what that's like, because I know you know a lot of people.
Yeah.
And people, you know, they put comments in here to try to keep them happy. What's the barometer of how many of those people are you worried about versus your consumer you're worried about? Because you got to play a role factoring in all those different people.
yeah, I mean, look, I've got the core group of people that help us with a selection of baits. And then I've got the Monster Bass community, and you know, my phone will blow up throughout the entire show of people that moment I ask a question, I've got opinions from 20 other people.
Right.
I mean, every day I get photos from people and I'm like, who is this? Because I just don't, like, I'm surprised that they've got my cell phone number, but then it's like, oh, it's Mark. And I'm like, Mark who?
It's Mark,
Right?
yeah,
Like,
help me out,
I
Mark.
have no idea because there's so many people. So yeah, so there's a fair bit of pressure from people that are like, I like my box, but, or I don't like my box, but,
Right.
and so there's some of that because, look, I could send a box to the state of Texas. That the Lone Star who lives in Texas handpicked every single bait, and someone would tell me that these baits won't work in Texas.
Right. That's
Right?
I love that. That's like, oh my goodness, is it the bait's fault, or you know, like I think that's that one piece is like worrying about whether they work or not is something that you have to predetermine. Am I sending them something that I know works? And I'm curious, like, how do you calculate? Is it because you've seen it or you've got a testimony of it? And I'm more of the flavor of like, send them something that, not that it's not worked, but realistically, I don't think you've sent out many things that can't catch a fish. I mean, we talked about some in the past
Sure.
of like just the terrible baits that just kind of failed, and whether it's like
Scattershad.
right, Scattershad or the McNasty frog or whatever that was, like the Christmas frog. But
Right.
even that bait, you could tweak that for sure to catch some fish.
Sure.
You're not just throwing in garbage baits. They're definitely proven, like you said. But the consideration of like these, I think you've done this test, is like, do you want off brands? Do you want major brands? You have major brand box takeovers, but putting together this October box, what is the first step? I mean, I think that's where we can start the show. It's like, how do you take a deep breath and you're like, okay, I have a box, regionally specific. We're going to pick a region of, let's just say, Southeast. Knowing we've got this fall transition coming on, you're going to go Southeast. We got Florida to consider. We got Georgia. We got all these folks in the Southeast quadrant of our nation. What's step number one to even piece this thing together? Because you can put any bait in that box and it probably is going to catch a fish during this time of year, depending on the water that they're fishing. How do you start?
I mean, look, I think I have to look at the time of year and the area of the country, because the time of year is probably going to dictate a lot, right? Now, I can't control when a cold front's coming in and all that, but I get a sense of like in the Southeast, these are the typical water temperatures. This is like the natural forage. This is like, you don't have you can't send 20-foot deep divers because of where they are. So there's a lot that goes into it. The other thing that really goes into it is I'm a lot of times I'm looking at what was in the previous month, because I can predict, or I can use research to tell me what I think the weather's going to look like in October. But it might be slower, it might be a little faster. And so if I'm behind, okay, well then probably the previous month's box might have helped, because they can carry that into the next month. But I've also got to look at the frequency with which I've put stuff. Like, you know, I know when we talked about the fall transition last week, we talked a lot about top water. And, you know, we're technically in fall, but a lot of the regions are still, you know, they're not quite there yet. And so it'd be really easy for me to put top water. But one of the things I've got to look at is, let's take a look at the mix of baits that I've sent in the previous 3 months to make sure I'm not overloading them. Like the last 2 months have been pretty heavy with some top water. And so this month I'd probably...
And I'll tell you, like where I'm at, I'm not catching fish topwater.
Yeah.
And that's that one piece of like, I wish I was catching fish topwater. And when it does turn on, like I'll have plenty of baits from the boxes to do that.
Yeah.
I think the one thing, like the consideration of all the things you're juggling, working with regionally specific anglers that are maybe pros to give you some insight. One question that pops in my mind is do you think, and I think maybe this is for the chat, is it more important to get a good value of baits, meaning that Monster Bass is providing baits, good bang for your buck, or is it more important that they give you baits that you consider curious about? And that one of that is that what do you think of that when you're building this box? Is it, I need to make sure I give them high value for their investment? Or is it, I want to give them successful baits? Because I think people shop for 2 different reasons.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about the Monster Bass community. It's like, oh, I get all these baits that, you know, I spend $30, $40, $50 depending on the box value they're buying. And they're getting X for their investment. Or I don't care how much I spent because this box is filled with baits that caught me fish. So I think that's the question to them. But also the question to you is, how do you factor that piece in?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely plays a role in it, because I know I've got to have a certain number of baits. I've got to have a certain level of value. Yeah. But I've got to also have the right baits, and then a mix of well-known brands and then lesser-known brands, because I want to honor the small businesses. And therein lies the challenge: is how do I make all of that happen and deal with the fact that it's September 25th, and something that I wanted to go into the October box that I felt really strongly about, I just found out today it won't arrive. Yeah. So now here I am 5 days before, and I got to figure out, like, no matter what we come up with right now, I may not actually be able to deliver it, because I've got a gaping hole in a bait that I thought was the home run.
Right. No, and I think that's a cool thing that you expose that and just share that with the Monster Bass community. These are these business vulnerabilities. Like everyone's like, oh yeah, I just have this fake business shell that just pumps stuff out. For you to be on a podcast talking about the struggles of running a business to have it be successful, not just as something to hopefully make money, but also due diligence to your consumers. It's like you're pulling back it's like this whole thing of the Wizard of Oz. You pull back the curtain. This is really what it takes to juggle this, to make sure you have the right baits at the exact right time, rather than pre-buying stuff. And everyone's always like, oh, is that just a discount surplus? Does he just buy off stuff and then just stockpile it? It's like, yeah, that's good, because I know River to Sea always just has thousands and thousands of whopper ploppers that they just love the discount. Yeah. It's like, yeah, that's just a no-brainer. It's just easy. You just happen to have that from 5 years ago sitting on the inventory and just threw them in the boxes. Because that's the real story here. Is like, you're building this creatively every month, which is a ridiculous amount of stress. When I sensed it when you and I were talking on the phone, you're like, if people only knew what it took to pull this off every month, it's a huge undertaking. Yeah. And it's fun to chat about it. So okay. So let's, I guess, break it down in my mind of like, okay, you have a box you've got to build. Obviously you're talking about the value. We got baits, you got a void. How do you start building it? What do you do? Talk us through it.
Well, in theory, I need to have 3 hard baits, 3 soft plastics, and a piece of terminal.
Perfect. Okay.
And you know, the terminal plays a big role in the value, right? The way I look at it is you've got to have a home run bait in there that has the value, because if you don't have a bait in there that has a certain dollar amount, it's almost impossible to get back to the value number that you have to deliver. And so that always becomes a challenge. And then, of course, you've got Z-Man, which everybody loves their stuff, but unless you've got the jackhammer at $15, all their soft plastics are like $4. Like, it's the greatest value on the planet because they last forever. I do before we start talking about the baits, I do want to talk about I do want to address the one point you said where it's like, well, am I just going out and buying like overstock every month and putting it in the box? The answer is no, because it's not available every month. I will tell you this. I do strategically buy, like when I find out that brand X had a contract that was like Walmart canceled it or something. Now I know they're stuck with a crap ton of, let's just pretend it's Z-Man jackhammers. When I find out that Walmart has canceled a Z-Man contract, and I'm not saying that they did in any way, but if they did, and I know that Z-Man's stuck with them, I'll call the company up and be like, hey, why don't you sell me, you know, this many thousand? And that's usually, that's the opportunistic one, because if I can get a jackhammer for cheap, I'll sit on those things until I find the right time to put it. So I don't care if I put a chatterbait in this month's box, I'll sit on that thing for another 6 months because it's a jackhammer. So, but.
And that's the irony of it. It's like, there's not going to ever be a bad month to throw in a bladed jig. Like, really, that I think people would be so tired of my boxes because I'd be like, all right, soft plastics, throw in a Cinco, throw in some kind of swim bait, and throw in some kind of jig trailer because you're fine. And just do that every month, because if you're not going through jig trailers, you're probably not fishing with jigs. Something's wrong. You might need some kind of Cinco to share with your friends and guarantee you can go and find a fish. And then some kind of swim bait is probably what you need. And then I'll give you 3 hard baits and then we just move on. And so I'm always like, that's so simple. But then you have this idea of these customers that are like whining, like, oh, I can't catch fish on these things. And I'm always like, why? What are you doing here? When Smallmouth Crush was on, he just said so many things so good. He's just like, because you're casting your Ned rig and you've already closed the bail and you're not letting your bait. Like the whole time he was talking about the people he was guiding, he's like, they're doing everything to fail. He's just watching them. And then he's helping them. But that's so funny. Of like, you go out fishing, you can almost get any bait to work if you understand the bait and understand what it's in, you know, the impressions that it's getting. And at the end of the day, these fish, if they want to eat, they're going to eat something. And if they don't want to eat, I don't care what you're throwing, they're not going to eat it. So that's the other flip side of like fishing. It's not always going to work.
Yeah. So
the bait building, the process of these boxes, I think it's cool because, like you said, you have this opportunity. The fun part, I think, people, to realize as a monster bass consumer, the hard work you're doing and researching and searching for a surplus or a closeout, that just benefits them. And I don't think people really understand that as much. Is they're like, oh, well, it just helps the business. It's like, well, no, like, that gives you a better bait in the box for a cheaper price. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes all of us as consumers, we're like, oh, it's just the big guys are going to make out better and they're going to save more money and they're dropping their price down. It's like, no, that actually helps the consumer on the back end. And I think sometimes we start thinking of the man or these big conglomerates or these big businesses, they're never out to do a service to the community. And I think there's a flip side on this is you're out here asking the community and talking to the community and asking them what they want. And then you have it's a customer driven business. So it's a unique take.
Totally. So let's talk about some of the baits, right? Like here's what I can tell you, right? When I think about the hard baits and the options that we've got available, we've got spinner baits, jerk baits, crank baits, chatterbait.
And so as you're saying those, in my mind, I said spinnerbait, yes. Jerkbait, yes. Chatterbait, yes. I was like, yeah. All right, pick 3, done. All right, we got it. Good. Throw the box together. Does it look nice? Is it pretty? It's going to work.
Yeah, but then then I got to think about the crankbaits, right? It's like, okay, I've got this one that's like a wake bait, right? Like, I'm not, and guys, don't. I'm not talking about these brands. I just grabbed them from the garage as examples. These aren't going in the box. I'm just examples. Everyone's just relax, right? Like crankbait. But am I putting a wake bait? Am I putting 0 to 8 foot? Am I putting a square bill?
Yeah.
Like now we've got to make those decisions too. And then it's like even little ones like this, like I don't for reference. I mean, it's tiny, this thing, and
perfect profile for. I mean, that thing kind of bluegill color, up shallow. It's not going to dive that deep. You can keep that thing cranking pretty fast, erratic, awesome for fall transition if your fish have pulled up shallow. Yes, and that's the thing is, I guess it goes back to that box design of like, okay, this is the one thing I think that people don't realize is you get to help dictate their fishing journey. And I think that's one thing to really understand, that you're working with anglers, you're working with professionals. And even I give you feedback of like taking the journey of like my kids and boys that have turned into anglers themselves and my own journey. What's the evolution of an angler, and allowing somebody that has some success in that to dictate the next type of bait you should probably try to use. And that's why I'm such a big proponent. Put the stuff to test. Like whatever comes in the box, expand your horizon. When you catch a couple fish on that crankbait you just showed, you'll understand why or why not to use it, and you'll be better at throwing your bladed jig that you probably prefer. But you'll take some feedback you learn. And then the coolest part with fishing, you mentioned you can't control the weather. Right. There's a day that bait you just showed will get eaten more times than anything else that you could throw. And that is the weirdest thing to understand. And I don't know the science behind all that. And I can pretend to sit here and say, oh, it's because the fish are moving up and they're chasing this exact style forage. I don't know why they prefer a silent one day versus the next. We're all just guessing because I can't talk to the fish. But every bait you put in the box will have its heyday. And you can prove that to yourself. It's just go out and throw the same thing every day.
Yeah.
And some days it works and some days it doesn't. And I think that's the fall transition is once you get behind the fish, like stop throwing what worked in the summer as it starts to work less. You have to get in front of these fish. Some of the best guys that talk about that are tactical bassin. When the fish are transitioning and moving, stop fishing what you used all summer. Make a change. The box gives you that perfect chance to just reach in the box and grab a bait and make that bait work. I'll tell you, my favorite thing fishing Lone Star would hate, forward-facing sonar. How cool is that? You now can actually go out and you can see the fish. It's so much easier. You get to go right to the fish. You don't have to search for fish. You actually get to look at the fish on the screen and then go through the box and see how they relate to that bait. What a cool opportunity that is in fishing. Yeah. So that actually should take the pressure off you. Is like people get to test and see how their retrieve works with each bait now in connection to fish on the screen. But that's a whole different story. But keep going.
All right. So like I'm I'm leaning towards a crankbait because we haven't had a crankbait in the box in a little bit. I think it's going to help us, as the fish move a little bit deeper or start to come up, but you're still going to cover a lot of water to go after them. And you can fish a crankbait year round. I mean, again, it just comes down to, like you said last week, the retrieve, whether you're slow or fast on the pause. And so I think that when I look at the hard bait category, I got 3 options. I put a ton of topwater in there. We've had a fair number of spinner baits. We haven't had many chatter baits in a while. And so I think that a crankbait for sure has to make the October box. And then it's going to come down to which patterns, which one, which diving depth, and who's getting what. And so, I kind of have that penciled in. Something else I have penciled in for October is this. Wacky weedless tungsten wacky jig head. We got a little finesse worm. We got some tungsten nail weights, and I feel like that's a pretty versatile setup that you can use not only year round, but I think it gives you a lot of options whether you're using the nail or not. whether you're using the jig head or just, you're putting that on the end of a regular hook. But I think it's a pretty good setup, and I don't know how many people have fished these, but I think it's a nice addition to your tackle box, and to have tungsten, because we talked about it last week. We're not sending you something that you can't use in Maine, Bryan Rand, or New Hampshire, or Vermont.
Right.
So
I'm going to tell you, I saw that. I'm going to hold this up. Like, look at this cool little thing that you're the magic of television.
Oh, yeah.
You sent me that. Okay. So you sent me that. And if you sent me that 5 years ago, I'd be like, what is this thing? You're crazy. Because I remember a couple years ago when I got one of those from a different company, I'm like, I don't need that. I'm going to wacky rig, and I'm going to hook my hook. I'm going to go Neko rig always with the nail weight in front. And I like the way that bait falls down. And I'm like, that does it for me. It's plenty. And I have these theories and reasons why I wanted that. But then I actually got one of these baits that was a weighted wacky hook. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to try it just to try to take my own medicine. And I threw it out, and I distinctively noticed that the fish took that bait at a different time of the presentation. I didn't get as many fish on the fall because the way it fell at my fish, whether it's coming down at an angle, spiraling, whatever, with the Neko versus the flap of this wacky setup. But if I lifted it and bounced it the way it was pulling up off the bottom, laying out flat and being pulled up in the middle, and the way that I'm in my brain, and I looked at it underwater because I always take a bait and I put it in the shallows, the way it fell back down with the middle weight, it seemed to serve better towards the fish. And I caught more fish as I was moving it back more like a jig, where the Neko rig, I do a lot more damage on the fall. And that's why I cover a lot more water fishing that bait. So I use a Neko like a search bait, but I was able to actually move that wacky weighted hook back more like a jig. And so I was like, that actually fits a different presentation with the same plastic on it. But I was able to connect with the fish in different areas in my retrieve. And so it opened my eyes. I'm like, okay, that's actually a complete different tool than just hooking a worm to a standard size 1 hook. The cool part is now you're talking about structure and how that thing has this metal, that's a metal guard on that for that hook guard. And that's going to be really, really good. Grass is one thing. It's not worried about really deflecting your snag grass, but that's going to deflect really well. You get into timber, you get into cover, that fall transition, and fish are moving up towards some wood pieces or whatever. That's going to play heavily into that. So that's a really cool, if you add that in and knowing it's tungsten, what a cool thing to open your mind up to maybe a way you've never fished a soft plastic. And that's all it really comes down to.
Yeah. So my question to everyone at home is, what are your thoughts on tungsten wacky rig jig head and maybe some tungsten, maybe a little finesse worm, so that you've got whether you're using your own hook or you want to use this jig head, I'm going to give you a setup that you can use year round, not just next month. So I'd love to know what you guys think in the chat. Now that I've got scent all over my fingers. Gross. What about
that hook? I was just going to say that hook is almost perfect for strolling as well. You talk about the strolling idea and having that hook, the way that tungsten head is. You could even probably take that weed guard off, and even though that hook is more octopus style and bends up out of a soft plastic, that would be perfect, almost like a darter head or something to swim. If you're using your forward-facing sonar, just throwing in like a soft-bodied swim bait, you could rig a real small one on that thing, and then it's just going to nose down. And instead of just using it wacky, the way that hook, I love how that hook comes way up out of the worm, and the fish are not going to be worried about seeing that exposed hook. They're going to go in, they're going to strike that thing. So like under 2 inches, maybe around 2, maybe even up to 2.5, a fluke without a boot tail on it would be great on that thing. So there's some really cool ways to rig that thing up, not just wacky. It's a pretty cool bait.
You know what I'd like to know in the chat? Those that use tungsten nail weights, what size do you use and why? And I'm gonna ask you the same question, Chris. Like, because I look at, like, I was online today. I was on Tackle Warehouse. I went to a brand and they got 7 different weights, and literally we're talking about like the difference between 1/64th of an ounce.
Yeah.
Like, is it that noticeable that you're going to use 2/64ths and I'm going to use 3/64ths? Like,
Okay.
I mean,
you may or may not like my answer. Okay, so I'm going to go back just for a little bit.
I already don't like it.
No, tungsten weights. I preferred, just because I never had tungsten, I preferred just the cost value of using a sheetrock screw for my Neko weight. I would just spiral in a sheetrock screw in the front end of my worm, brought the worm down into play, caught plenty of fish, no big deal. But it's kind of hard sometimes to thread in the screw.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't always want the screw head exposed and showing, but there's all kinds of different things you can do. Here's what I do with my choice. Do I want it to fall fast and fish deep, or do I want it to slowly fall in front of those fish? When I do that, here's my exact choice of size. Okay, this is how specific I am, because I'm really specific in my tungsten no weights. I say, I want this one to fall really fast. I'm going to look for a big one in my terminal box. Then when I want it to fall really slow, I look for a really small one, because that's exactly how important that becomes to me. Of, come on, like, line size dictates that a lot, of how quick the line can cut and fall through the water. The bait becomes important. Is this a 5-inch Cinco? Is it a 6.5-inch Cinco? Am I Ned rigging? Like, am I using what would normally be on a Ned rig, a little crawdad? Am I Neko rigging that? Nail weights, I think people just get ridiculous with that. So that was my long answer to say, like, come on, big one, small one, I think you're probably fine. Most nail weights too, you can break off a piece. You can let it fall with no slack. You can put it on some resistance so a pendulum falls. So there's so many more things to be worried about than the exact weight of the nail weight. But that's just my honest thing is big, little, you're fine.
Yeah.
Hope that helps.
It helps, and I'd also like to thank the Burly Hype Man for calling me out. Yes, I'm pretty good at math. I understand that 2/64ths is really 1/32. I was just, listen.
Just throwing numbers. Right?
Throwing numbers.
You know what? Hey, with first contacts, can you just make some obscure weighted ones? Don't put it like 1/32, 1/64, whatever. Like, put it, I don't even know. Like, we'll talk about the fractions that you can't break down anymore. Just make it so random and weird, just a tiny bit heavier. So
yeah, 1/19.
Yeah, that's the one I wanted. That's exactly what I was getting at. Like, I want a big one, a small one, and a 1/19. So it's like, come on.
I think the guy at Tackle Warehouse would be like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, well, no, just everything, no matter what it is, let's just go just a little bit more obscure. So I think that's pretty funny. No, nail weight. If you tungsten, I think it's really cool because realistically, if you're using a sheetrock screw, if you're using lead, you're going to have those things. You lose the bait sometimes, whether you break off or the fish flicks it, that gets in the water. And again, if you're going back to tungsten, lead sucks, friends, and you're not going to be poisoning water or anything else. So moving to that tungsten.
Yeah.
And now that one, that's what I want to talk about. That is a whole different gig than just a nail weight, because it has an exposed head. And that's what I go back to, that sheetrock screw. That head is going to come down and make contact. If you're fishing anything that has firm substrate on the bottom of your lake, that gets to tick and make a noise, and it's bouncing across the bottom as you're retrieving it. That is so key. I fish in a lake normally that is just, it's dirty. It's got tons of grass, and I'm not bouncing on the bottom with anything. But if I go down and I'm fishing Berryessa or Folsom or anywhere else, I want that extra tick. I want that nail weight to have a head that's exposed. So when it falls vertically down at an angle, my worm or crawdad gets to bounce and tick and make noise as it's going across. So that's important.
I like how it's dirty, and he lives in you probably have an HOA, don't you? I bet you got an HOA.
So I'll tell you, we just get the newsletter. They're like, all we're gonna do is shoreline improvement. They want to dredge the lake. If people had their way, they would dredge it and poison it with gas and chlorine, and they'd probably paint swimming lines on the bottom of the lake. Because it's like, if you got any grass, they're like, oh, it's the end of the world. We're all gonna die. But yeah, I say dirty just because it's a muddy bottom, and it's not like we have any real rock outcropping and those type things. We're at home in Northern California. You got these reservoirs that are super clear, and you see 30, 40 feet down in the water. and you're bouncing jigs along the bottom, they need to be making some noise down there. So
Yeah.
it's a cool nail weight that has that exposed head.
Who can name the bait?
Well, I mean, you want me to turn around and grab one that looks almost the same? Yeah, should we do this game?
Oh my goodness. Who can name the weight or the bait?
Let's just see. I'm gonna get close. I just grabbed one. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, I just grabbed it. Is it close?
I think
we're
it's
looking.
yeah, it's the same bait. All right.
Well,
What can we use these for?
so I pulled the X-Zone Adrenaline Craw. Is that the one you have?
The adrenaline bug.
I'm sorry, the Adrenaline Plug. You're right. What can you use that for? So I would first, if I'm going to choose that bait and I'm going to go out and fishing, I'm thinking I'm punching something. Mm-hmm. I'm pitching, I'm flipping, I'm trying to get this bait hooked up with a Texas rig style pinned weight that is just going to be drugged down to the bottom. It's going to come flashing. The reason the appendages are like this, it's on purpose. That is to get through cover. Really, really narrow. It's a great presentation. It's a good body profile. You can split apart those tails. But this bait is specifically designed to get through weeds and to be able to punch down to where the big fish live. Now, I can use this fantastically sideways to mimic a bait fish swimming on the back of a bladed jig or a swim jig. So this is a great bluegill pattern swimming coming back to me. So what can I use this for? You can hook this up drop shot right through the nose and swim it through the water. You could Texas rig this, Carolina rig this. You can punch with this, put on the back of a trailer. The easier question with fishing is like, what can't I do with this thing?
Sure.
But that's not what most people see this. They see this bait, they're like, oh, I got a beaver tail, I got to be punching. It's like, G-Crack, they're bellows, they're different baits that just look like a big leech of some sort or whatever. That's taught a lot of people like, maybe I can use these baits doing something different. And I think one thing that I'll mention, when people are talking about you buying surplus baits and throwing things in the box, X-Zone, Jim from X-Zone, that guy he's incredible. He's a stud. Some of the best anglers in the world working with him on tour, making a living specifically by catching fish, working with X-Zone. And you have those baits in the box all the time. So I'm a huge fan. That's why I've got a bunch of them on the wall behind me, because I like to catch fish, and those things work. They work good.
Yeah, this was a suggested bait, oddly enough, as a chatterbait trailer, and I got a lot of mixed reaction on that one.
So good. Did they say specifically were they going horizontal or were they going vertical? That is a fish. Like if you look at my screen, like how do you not see? That is like the best representation of a fish. It's the same exact profile of a fish.
Yeah.
It looks like a fish. And I promise you, when they were first making these, that wasn't what they were thinking. But then when you think of like punching, what in the world are they punching, making this look like? That still looks like a dying bait fish when it's going down.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's also a crawdad, because that's why I always tease, like, how smart are fish? And I always ask the question, when you're fishing, what are you pretending your bait is? That's just a fun thing for me to talk about with people. Am I pretending this is a fish, or am I pretending it's a crawdad? I don't think it really ultimately matters. But if you can put together in your mind, I'm thinking it's a fish and I'm retrieving it like a fish moves, if that gets you bit, well, then it was success. If you're retrieving it and you're thinking it more of a crawdad and that works, well, now you're onto something as well. But
all right, well, so
keep going.
But okay, but if you're picking a trailer for a chatterbait,
yeah,
are you thinking? And again, listen, there's a million things that we can put on the back of a is a trailer, and I've seen it all. But
this is one of my favorite.
Yeah, last week you talked about a craw.
Yeah.
So
crawdads, chatterbaits, they work. Yes, the answer is yes to both, because I grew up fishing a bladed jig chatterbait, and in my mind I always thought it to be a fish. I always put on a trailer that looked like some type of fish, soft swim bait. Then tactical bassing guys, I reference them all the time because that's their life. They're not brand specific. They just show people what works. They talked about flipping their boot tail upside down to give it a little bit more action. And so they actually mount their soft swim baits upside down when they're using a chatterbait. But then you look at like the chatter spike. You don't always want to have that boot action back there. So you got Z-Man selling you a product that just has a single spike. I like the X-Zone. They've got their whiplash shad. Now you don't even have a tail on it. So now I'm fishing something that looks like a fish without a fish tail kicking because the blade does almost all the work you need. But then now I go fish with John on the Delta and he's throwing it into the grass. And those are spots where you get to watch the crawdads evade your bait and you scare the crawdads with your boat and you see the crawdads swim away. So in my mind, I immediately go, oh, I want to have a crawdad trailer. I want to make this look like a crawdad. So now to make it even worse, that's when he switched to the Neko Macho. And it's like, wait, that's not a crawdad. That's back to maybe a fish, but it's just something that's so big and moving. And that's when I had that idea like, oh, I'm going to use the grande bass, that airtail wiggler. Yeah. And that's such a great trailer. So now you've asked me, what do I use as a bladed jig trailer? And I just answer the same. Yes, I use everything because different times give you different results. And there's nothing easier than fishing a bait, knowing there's some fish and changing your trailer until you figure out, oh, the fish actually bit it better. Meaning they didn't get turned off. They didn't short strike it. They didn't pull the back end of it. They came and they head bit this thing. And I'm now fishing my bladed jig out of the mouth of that fish. And I have to use my pliers. I know I'm onto something at that point. And then I stick with that trailer for the rest of the day. But yeah, I think it's smart to understand the fish eat so many different things at so many different times. And that's the beauty of trailers is you change your bait just by simply changing what's on the back of it.
All right. I'd like to know from the chat, do you guys want a chatterbait in the October box, or would you prefer a spinnerbait? I mean, they both cover a ton of water. They're both going to work this time of year, but I'm curious to know what you guys would like. 'Cause, I mean, me personally, I haven't put chatterbaits in the box in a while, but I'd love to know what everyone thinks. Let me see here. I mean, first of all,
can you do a poll on that? Is there a way to do a poll today or are we not?
Well, that would require me to handle everything. And right now that's.
No, I didn't even have my chats up. I was like, I don't have the chat off to the side. I logged in. It's just, hey, I'm going to give you my 2 cents.
Yeah.
I have a lot of bladed jigs. I love spinnerbait fishing and I love the idea of thinking fish have moved. I love the idea of thinking storms are coming in. If there's one saying in fishing, like into the wind, or if there's wind, spin for the wind, all these different things. If you could put me on a lake where I'm casting into the sun, keeping my shadows behind me, casting into the wind, and I'm throwing across the point, I'm throwing a spinnerbait. And I'm going to find fish there. So a spinnerbait's hard to beat.
The show, the LA Kings just called me, so I think they're calling me up. The show might be over. I don't know. All right, so that's good to know about the win. So far, I've got. I think it's leaning more towards. God, it's right down the middle. Yeah. If only you could do a survey.
Holy, take it. That's technology that's out there eluding us. Yeah, I think the chatterbait discussion's fun because like then you start to break down the chatterbait. You start to break down the spinnerbait. And this is the beauty of all this fishing is it gets so complicated, but it's so rewarding to then fine tune it. Do you just go willow blades? Do you throw in a Colorado blade? What brand of chatterbait do we get to discuss? And I think that's when you as this person ultimately putting the box together, like what do you ever have like nights where you can't quite fall asleep because it's such a hard decision to build a box? Or are you at peace with like, no, I'm putting together a good product and you're going to always have some people whining? How do you deal with that each month?
I think that I do my best to put together a good box every single month. And I know that no matter what I do, somebody's going to be pissed at me. And so it used to bother me more than it does now. Because I get that social media gives everyone the ability to stand on their platform and bitch and moan if that's how they choose to live their life. The parts that frustrate me in the middle of the night are when my phone will, because I do sleep with my phone on Do Not Disturb because, I get a lot of random calls. But so when they call more than once, it goes through. And usually it's like a factory or the brand directly calling to tell me that the shipment isn't going to come in on time. And I'm like, wait a minute, I've already sent the catalog to like the guidebook. I've already sent it to print. What am I going to do? And that keeps me up. That's when I'm grabbing the melatonin and I'm chewing one down because I'm like, oh God, I don't want to start thinking about this now.
That's tough. I think for me, like when you talked about the crankbait, my mind immediately darts to the last video I saw with Mike Iaconelli. And I like in my own personal justification, he's a great angler, catches a lot of fish.
Sure.
And he said in his video about fall fishing, a crankbait is a guaranteed amazing bait to search water. Mm-hmm. Cast it, crank it, cover water. So I think if I was building a specific box to a specific region and having the validation of an angler like that, it's like, go ahead, go. I'd probably put it in the guidebook. If you don't like this month's crankbait, please contact Mike Iaconelli.
Yeah.
It's like here's his email. Have a great day. Because I think, like, seriously, if you can't get that to work, it might not be the crankbait. And here's a video for some tips on how to fish it. But no, I think that's a funny way you put together the best you can. And then, I mean, I think this is the fun part to think about. And I'm asking you this question. This reward of you putting together a box. Obviously, this is a business. And it's got to make sense financially. But how much reward do you see and how does that change each month? Like last month's box was a home run versus last month's box suck. How does that factor into the life of Rick?
I don't think any of them suck.
Yeah.
I don't.
No, that's why I want
because as long as I remain true to not buying baits that are discontinued. Now, I might buy them today and then like in 3 months Strike King decides to discontinue. There's nothing I can do about it. But I won't knowingly buy discontinued product, which makes me feel like I'm remaining true to what the mission. So I feel good. I feel good about every single box. There are boxes that I look at and I'm like, I don't know, because sometimes I don't look at it and say there's a clear home run. And again, the home run is like, oh, there's a bait that's $15, or there's a bait that's like, here's a great bait from a great brand that I feel really comfortable with that everyone's gonna like. So, there's that mix, right? Like when I put brands in the box that I'm like, Bait Labs. I get so many requests for Bait Labs, but I really don't know like where that sits. Like, is it the middle of the road or is it the upper middle class, right? Like, I don't know because it's not like a household brand name, but they make really good stuff. He uses.
They catch fish. No, It's funny. I set you up on a question and you answered it. I think like the psychological review. Like I love this podcast long format. We just get to talk and I ask you about something, whether they're good or and I use the word suck. We talked about that with a person that called in a while ago and just to ruffle some feathers. You answered in an honest review that you feel good about what you do up front. And I think that's an important thing to like almost expose that and share that. And I did not intend for that question to go that direction. I wanted you to be like, I cried because Joe said that the baits were bad that month. But you gave the answer from a business perspective and a personal connection to what you're building.
Yeah.
You're doing the best you can every month and you feel confident in what you're delivering. And I think without having us have this set up as a question and understand the answer, you answered in the way that I would want somebody that I'm putting my money towards. Like you're committed to providing quality in these boxes every month. And I think at the end of the day, like the responsibility kind of goes back to the consumer, like go and sometimes learn how to fish these things. I think that is a big consideration of some baits do take a more progressed angler, if that's a nice way to say it. Just
Sure.
a person that fishes more or is more adept at using baits. It's like you add in walking baits, you're like, oh, this is awesome. This is the greatest walking bait ever. And you have a fantastic one. And just know right off the bat, not everyone can walk a bait. Not everyone's going to retrieve the slack the right way and make this bait even look like it's edible by fish. And so that's one hard thing is you're like, this is a great bait. It's a great value. And a lot of you are not even going to be able to cast it correctly. So that's pretty tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's fun though.
It really is. You know, I'm looking at this, I don't think I can show it.
Come on. Yeah, do it. Nobody's watching. It's all right. It's just us.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's a brand that that recently announced that they're gonna shut down. And I had a conversation with them, and I thought about it. I was like, well, maybe I can help them. Maybe I can help them by like buying a bunch of their inventory and pumping it out the door into this month's box, build some awareness, and introduce the brand to a bunch of people that may not know about it. But then it sits with me that like I know what the feedback's going to be. Like my intention is to buy this bait from this company because they're sitting on tons of them. They're going to go out of business. And if I can help them, I help them. Yes, I'm probably going to get a good price on it, but it's a really solid bait. And as someone in the chat said, like, discontinued doesn't always mean that it's bad. It just
that's
means
huge.
that it just means that it may not have sold, and it could be a variety of reasons because they don't have any marketing dollars, or you know the product just didn't pick up. Because according to the Burley Hype Man, once again, fat-free shads are undefeated. But yeah, I immediately think about when it comes to baits, like, all right, what is the customer gonna think? Because I can't just take a great deal. I got to be able to defend why I bought it. And my goal is to not have many conversations like the scattershad conversation that I had with everyone when I picked that bait. Because had I simply just read the Tackle Warehouse reviews, I would have saved myself a lot of stress. And I still think I have 300 of them left.
You just went full circle back to one of the first questions I asked. Is your customer response about baits more important than the value of you buying baits? You just answered it right there. Yes, it's more important. Your customers, you're more invested in making sure the Monster Bass community is happy with the purchase versus the amount of money you've saved in buying discounts. I mean, if people could take one thing away from the show, and it's not sit here and like boost up the Monster Bass boxes, like go buy boxes. And we hardly ever talk about this on the show. The show is all about exposing what's going on behind Monster Bass. You painlessly build a box every month. And this is so fun because we can't even get to the details of what it all takes to make it. But the number one concern that we keep falling back to is, what is the response going to be of your customers? And that is unlike most businesses. Most businesses like, this is good for the bottom line. This is what we're doing, XYZ. These are checkpoints in a spreadsheet. You're not building these boxes off spreadsheets. I know you have to be connected to that spreadsheet.
Oh, you have to.
Because you told me, you're like, you got 3 hard baits, you got 3 soft baits, terminal tackle, the price of the book, the price of the box, and going to bags, all these different things. But at the end of the day, you're sitting here talking to me, and we're an hour in, and you're like, the thing that haunts me the most is customer feedback. And that is the reality of like, that's why I enjoy talking to you about, hey, like what baits are going in next month's box? Hey, what can we do to make this fishing experience better for the consumer? And I'm always the bad guy. I'm like, give them something they don't know how to use yet, because that makes them better. But then there's only a certain amount of people that like change. They're like, forget that. I just want XYZ because that's all they know. So you've got to balance all of the different opinions. And I mean, it's fun. And I think that you've tackled this very, very well. And it's like, let's keep going. Like, so building this box, it sounds like we got 3 soft plastics in our box. You showed me a couple.
Well, I don't know about all those, but I'm
Yeah, but you
pretty-
show me a finesse. I mean, that's like finesse worm to match. I think that's one thing. You almost always give a complete pair, and that's one thing I love is if you give me a jig head, you give me a worm that I can use on it. I think that's super important to always stay true to that. If you're giving me a wacky new tungsten jig head, then you've given me the tools to arm it to go and use it. So if I'm a first timer to bass fishing, like my new little 9-year-old buddy up there, he's got his mom got him his box.
Yeah.
He gets that jig head. He may not have any finesse worms. And so you completing that story is one piece. And then next, you're going to give them something. Do you ever just throw in a Hail Mary of like, I don't even know how they're going to use this, but
No, I've never thrown in a Hail Mary where I'm like, I don't know how they're going to use it, but I have thrown in baits from brands where I'm like, oh God, I don't know what they're going to think of this one. I mean, on paper it looks good, in the pool it looks good. I don't know what they're going to think about the brand. Like, everybody knows my my blunder with the Christmas party gone wrong frog.
the fat bastard guy.
Oh my God, I love that name. I so badly
I know.
wanted to buy it, but I was like, oh, like 1 in 3 frogs is like starting to sink. Like, forget it.
Yeah.
They're just fat bastards and they're going to sink.
Yeah, I think confirmation bias is a huge thing that a lot of people deal with. And it's like, if it doesn't have that right name, it would be really fun. I'd love it if at 1 month you could take random baits that are not as well known and unbox them and unbrand them and send them out without any markings and just be like, I want to know what you think of this spinnerbait. And it's the most obscure company in the world. And it's just like, everything just comes in a plastic baggie. And you're like, okay, here's bait 1, here's bait 2. That'd be so much fun.
We are doing that in 2025. In the first 3 months, you will get a bag. You'll get a bait in a clear maybe it's just in a clear plastic bag, or the box will just be like black and white with instructions and a QR code, and you're gonna actually test a bait for a brand that wants to bring something to life, but we're not going to tell you who the brand is. We're not going to tell you that. We're just going to tell you it's like a 1/4 ounce or sorry, for those playing at home, it'll be some 1/19 ounce buzz bait or something, and we're going to ask you to tell us what it is. And then once the feedback gets all compiled, probably a year later, because that's usually how long these big companies take, a year later, you're going to get the finished product, and we're going to tell everyone that which bait it was that they got to participate in. And my goal is to convince like 4, because I don't know how it's going to be received, but I'd like to try it 4 times next year. I'd like to convince 4 different companies to let us test prototypes for them in the box and see if they like that.
Unbiased testing. No, that's that whole thing. Like, I'm really into this confirmation bias, is like how things align with your belief and you block it out with like all the facts and details written in front of you. But you're like, no, that doesn't fit with my belief systems. It's like, what is wrong with you? Here's the facts right in front of you. This thing catches fish, but because it's not brand X, Y, or Z, that's just a mental block. So if you can eliminate that mental block and you're just providing a bait, I think that is such a cool opportunity. I would love it. Just maybe someday I'll go to the factory and I'll just sit there and I'll unbox all the baits for like 20 people's boxes. And they just get these, like all the soft plastics dumped in.
Yeah.
And they just get a surplus, because we all know in the world of soft plastics, the bag and packaging costs as much as the soft plastics. Maybe just send a box that just looks like worms. It's just, whether they're 6 to a box and we're just going to do all soft plastics, and you open it up, it's just this big pile of soft plastics. I think that's one of the best things you could do. Is like, how I just reach in, I pull it out, and it's like, okay, how would I rig this? And it's like, here's your test. You don't know what brand it is. Then you start really looking like, okay, what does the plastic feel like? How does it hold up? How does it hold up to a fish? How does the hook being embedded weedless, how does it pop out enough? Am I missing some on hook sets? All those little things of like, oh, that bait only worked for 1 fish. Cost to catch profile, like that's probably not the greatest investment. If you don't know the name, you don't think about all those things. Or if you do know the name, you don't think about it. You're like, oh, I just have to use XYZ. But anyway, went off on a tangent, but that's that whole fun thing of like hide the brands the best you can sometimes, and just let the bait prove itself.
Yeah.
I think that's fun. That's cool.
All right, I want to be.
What are you calling that? Yeah, you're gonna say, is that a secret bait plan? Like, what do you call that?
I don't know what we're gonna call the program, and I have to design the packaging for this because it's part marketing on our end and part participating with a brand that's going to participate in this program idea that I have. So I haven't really come up with it, but I do think the box should be just like black and white. No frills. Like, here it is. these are your instructions. You know,
like old generic medicine. Yeah, it's just like you go in. There's the generic aisle in the grocery store, just black and white. That's awesome.
Totally.
That'll be fun.
Totally. So yeah. So I think here's where I'm set. Here's where I'm at right now. A crankbait for sure. A chatterbait or spinnerbait is what I heard from the audience. Obviously, whatever one we pick, we got to have trailers for it. I'm 100% down on wacky rigs because, look, whether you're new, if you're new, that wacky rig's such an easy way to like get started, and you can catch fish year round with it. So I do think the wacky rig, and I think the jig head is one that is different. And so I think it's a different presentation that maybe a lot of people haven't had. And so I think if I end up with a wacky rig, I got to give you the worm, I got to give you the O-rings, I got to give you the nail weights so that you can, you can try it without the nail. I need another hard bait.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan. This is the time of year. Like, I was surprised the other day. I went out with a jerk bait and I couldn't find a fish in shallow water. Anything short of like 16, 18 feet, I was finding nothing. But that is a bait that I often go to just to start moving, especially to see if small fish have moved up. Because with a jerk bait, you can bring a half-pound bass up to a 10-pound bass, even bigger. A jerk bait will catch anything. And so a jerk bait for me, if I just want to search for fish, I feel like a complete failure. Is I'm like, I've got a fish that looks like it's dying and I've covered half the lake. Like, what is wrong with the fish in the water? And really, there was just no fish up shallow. And so that's kind of the reality for me is I know that erratic, because a crankbait oftentimes has to deflect off something. The jerkbait needs no extra help. It's just you twitching it. So jerkbait for me is always a good go-to just to find fish and fall. You're trying to see where they're at. So I just eliminated water when I was doing that. We were out and I'm like, there's no fish up shallow. Kelly's like, what do you mean? I go, I would have caught something by now. And then immediately we turned and threw deep and both of us started catching fish. Yeah. And so that's a jerk bait for me is a tough one to beat.
All right. Well, listen, for everyone watching at home, these are the conversations that I'm literally having all the time with people on the team and trying to determine like what baits I want to put in the box. And then the fun begins because then like, Chris can give me the list and tell me, like, these are the baits I'm throwing in California this time of year. Then I got to go out and get them. And that in itself is an art form. And just
the art, I'll tell you the other big art is you never tell them that it's recommended from a guy in California either, because the rest of the nation's like, we don't want anything to do with California. Totally. So just understanding that piece. Just the irony and the joking aside, it's like realistically, you've got to manage this into regional boxes.
Sure.
So what a cool undertaking. I mean, it's cool that you gave us some insight of the anguish it causes, but at the same time, what fun to know that you feel so confident about putting together a quality product and to get a glimpse of the work that it takes. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And I thank all you guys for tuning in and listening to this. We've got a little bit more show for you. And so what I'd love to do is I'd love to get over to the trophy room because you guys know we love to celebrate your wins and your catches, and whether they're big or small, you can head over to monsterbass.com/pb, upload your catch. Stay tuned in the next couple weeks. We're making a change to that page. You're going to be able to see your standing by state, by body of water. You're going to get to see your submissions in real time. It's going to be a lot more interactive so that you can see where in the Monster Bass community your catch actually is. And, a little bragging rights, so that when I catch the new state record in California on Castaic, I will not only be the California leader, but also the Castaic king. So, without further ado, let's go to the first one. This is Brantley Bennett. Little dude caught a 7-pounder in North Carolina on a chatterbait.
Nice.
I mean, I'll be honest, unless he's like a little person, which he is, but that doesn't look like 7 pounds to me. But I'm not.
You know what? It's for him. It felt like 7. But we'll just say it felt like 7 pounder. Yeah.
I'm giving that to him. 7 pounder.
Yeah.
Good work, fella. All right. Next up, we got. Let's see. We got. Wait a minute. Levi Tomlinson.
Dude. This is what I'm talking about. Look at that fish. That's incredible.
He caught a 3-ounce fish in Tennessee on a swim jig.
I want to see that swim jig. Show me the swim jig, and then we'll talk. But that is cool. I mean, I'll tell you, the local club we've got, they actually give prizes during the Derby to the smallest fish caught. Yeah, and that brings out these kids trying to catch the tiniest fish. That is a cool little bass, little baby fry. Good on you, Levi. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's the next version of fishing with flare fans, because we all know he likes to catch the little dudes. All right, the next one. Whoa.
Double fisting.
Jeepers. This is Chad Romero out of Louisiana. He's got 8 pounds, 7 ounces. Which one?
Yeah, who cares? He's jammed. He's got his fob on there. He's connected to his little trolling motor. He's got a little flat deck up front. That guy means business. I like it. Double fisting, fluke, and a bang stick. That guy's got it. Nice work, buddy.
Yeah. All right. Chase Hall, 3 pounds, 12 ounces out of North Carolina. It's a good-looking fish. Looks like the stuff I'm going to be catching.
That's exactly it. See that big old spinnerbait? Choked the spinnerbait. Still got the bait hanging in its mouth.
Yeah.
Nice one.
Good one. All right. Sean Ruggenberg, 7 pounds, 4 ounces.
You know, I think people, if they don't weigh a lot of fish, are like, dude, that's about 7 plus. So good for him. I mean, that's the next phase of life will be getting a measuring board and doing weight to length ratios. We'll talk all about that maybe in a future podcast about a little event we're going to do. But having a good fish like that, he's smiling, whether it's 7 pounds. I'll just tell you, my reference of I'm 6'5", and normal. I'm a big dude, but my hand closed in a fist, it just easily fits inside of a bass that's 7 pounds. So that's my reference is 7 pounders. You got to be able to put your fist in its mouth, no problem. And so that's just kind of when you start to look at how you're holding the fish and how big they are. But hey, nice job, Sean.
And then last but not least, this is Dante. I talked with Dante today. He caught this during a tournament. It is a 9-pound, 1-ounce smallmouth. He caught this during a tournament. I was like, you got video on that, bro? And he goes, I wish. He goes, I have pictures to prove it, though. And I'm like, yes, you do. So that
that thing could win some smallmouth tournaments. Depending on the body of water, he goes in, he weighs 1 fish, and he's the winner. He's like, because your average fish, they're like, oh, minimum weight is going to be 1 pound, sometimes 2 pounds. Mm-hmm. But he walks up there and weighs in his 9-pound, 1-ounce smallie. The way smallies fight, just that complete dominance underwater, moving their head, having their mouth closed, having the profile. They fight so much different than largemouth. Yeah, that fish probably put him a little work, but congrats on that. Can't even imagine.
So good, so good. All right, last but not least, we've all been sitting here waiting. I want you to do me a favor if you're still here. If you like the show so far, give us a thumbs up. Liking it helps my algorithm and makes me feel better about myself. But we got the golden tickets. All right, golden tickets are back. If for some reason your box doesn't have a golden ticket, just call customer support. Email customer support. We'll get you a number and we'll have them pull it from the warehouse so that you don't have to worry about it. But we'll get you one. So if you didn't get one, my apologies, but don't freak out. we'll send you a number. All right, so I'm going to call out the number. And if I do, and you've got it, take a picture of yourself and the ticket so I can see the ticket number. Email it to me at marketing@monsterbash.com. We're going to hook you up with some good stuff. So today's golden ticket number is... You weren't doing that, Jared. Fix isn't doing it.
He didn't do the drum?
No, he doesn't want to do the drum.
It's all messed
It's
up.
probably going to cost me.
Everyone
It's
should
going to
do it.
cost me extra for that. All right, gold ticket number is 4219, 4219. So if you've got that ticket, congratulations. Email me at marketing@monsterbash.com. Reminder, you can always consume this podcast or listen to it on your favorite channel, platform, Amazon, Apple, Netscape, AOL.
Spotify.
You know what I'd love to know? I'd love to know if anyone in the chat, does anyone here actually use AOL or have an AOL email address? If you do and you use it and you email me
That's good.
at rick@monsterbash.com, I'm going to send you something.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna find my login because I have one. I have an old like old wave rider at AOL.com. You're gonna see an email. Yeah.
Mine was
coming.
mine was grape832 at AOL.com.
All right, I'm finding my login. I had to petition them once because I had something signed up to AOL that I had to go back and get it to reset. It was a nightmare, but I was able to prove that it was me. It was years ago, but I haven't used it since.
My
Just
AOL
brought back the
is
AOL.
it's so old that I think my password was 4 numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember that cool the dial-up noise like that? Like, good days. Good.
All
days
right,
for
BB
sure.
Raider. If I was given one guess, and I don't mean this in any disrespectful way, I might have said, of all the people in the community that I know of, who would have an AOL? I might have selected you, and I might have selected I don't know, Jason Sullins.
So good.
I hope he's not listening because I don't
No,
want to offend either one of them, but like
great. I miss those days. Don't you miss the emails when it was a free platform and then on the bottom of the email had some kind of weird, crappy advertisement? Like my mother-in-law still uses like a free platform, and my wife's like, you don't have to have that email. Like you can get a free email and you don't have to have like weight loss tips at the bottom of your family emails. But I love that.
I remember when I was in college, and I met a girl in one of the AOL chat rooms, and she sent me like brownies or cookies, and I just remember thinking to myself, "Oh, that was so nice." And then I was like, "Wait a minute, this is some random girl that I've never met and I'm never gonna meet, and she sent me brownies or cookies. I can't eat this stuff."
Dude, you have no idea. Could have been Fix, could have been me, could have been anybody. Just pose, before catfish, it was catfish, and you got catfished.
God, I want to get catfished. If anyone out there wants to catfish me and send me something, yeah, feel free. I'll give you my address and everything. So
Done.
All right, well, listen, we had a pretty good show.
That's fun.
And now I've got some work to do. I've got to figure out what baits to put in the box and do so in like a short period of time. So yeah, we'll see how it goes.
I want to close out my thoughts. Like I mentioned the jerkbait, and immediately I thought, I didn't even fish a jerkbait that much a few years ago. And it's funny when you have these things of like what works for me right now. That's a tough call for you to have this thing where you've got beginners, you got intermediates, you got advanced people buying these boxes. For you to be able to pull this off and to know that you're bringing good value to people every month and feeling confident and working with all these different brands. I mean, hats off to you. I get my box every month and I'm excited to go and try something that I wouldn't have gone and bought, let alone maybe something that may not be working because I haven't been doing it, and to challenge myself. So for me, I just look forward to it every month. I'm excited. And any way that I can help with the feedback and help someone else in their fishing journey, like what a cool opportunity to get us out and get us on fish. So cool show, cool thing to be a part of, and I appreciate having me along the ride.
Appreciate you. Thank you. We'll see you next week. All right.
All right, we'll see you.
Bye. All right, guys. I just saw in the chat that somebody emailed me from their AOL. If that's true, you guys are psychos. That you guys already infiltrated my inbox with AOL. I would be so honored, and I will brag about it all night that my community has AOL emails. Oh my God, I did. Beth Langston. She's a proud AOL user. It works great. She's had 0 problems. And why switch? Beth Langston, I'm hooking you up. What do I have here? Beth Langston, I can email you back on your AOL email, and I will coordinate something. I'm going to send you a little something by carrier pigeon. It'll probably get there soon, but I do want to thank you for really like stepping up, because I didn't. Oh my God! Now I'm getting another one. I can't make this stuff up, you guys. Oh, MSN, Tom Brewster. Just so you know, I have an MSN that I use for all my spam. So like if I'm signing up for the coffee club, I always give MSN, and then the kid always looks at me and he's like, I know what he's thinking. He's thinking the same thing I'm thinking about AOL. He's like, oh, those old people. I bet your security code is your dog's name. Well, you know what? You're right. It is. God, that's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you for the laughs, you guys. I'm glad that we can find a little humor in dumb stuff like AOL, Netscape. What's next? We're bringing back Friend Finder and our Friendster and MySpace. Truth be told, if you haven't checked out MySpace lately, they did a complete overhaul, and the platform's so much different. True. My friend actually works there. Anyways, all right, guys. We'll see you next week. I think I've covered everything I wanted to talk about, and I am now sufficiently fueled up with laughter to get me through the rest of the day. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you next week. Bye.